Johnny Depp and Amber Heard had a marriage that ended in a very public and messy divorce. But what if I told you that there's one common mistake that you might be making that could lead to your marriage going down that same path? It's not just about the major conflicts, the abuse, the manipulation, or irreconcilable differences. There's one subtle, destructive habit that can erode any marriage from the inside out. It's one that many of us fall into without ever realizing it. And if you don't catch it in time, it could be too late. But stay with me, because later in this video, I'm going to reveal a simple technique that can stop this from ever happening. There's this mistake that can slowly destroy your marriage, but it's not what you might think. It's something most people do without realizing the damage that it actually causes. And you don't realize it because the results don't tend to blow up in your face all at once. Instead, your marriage dies a slow death by 1,000 cuts. But in the end, your marriage is destroyed either way. And now that we've got the doom and gloom over with, I should probably point out that there is a simple way to avoid the destructive habit. So if you're like most people, your marriage probably started strong, full of love, connection, and a ton of intimacy that probably feels like it's been a long time since you had it. And the problem becomes that over time, small, seemingly insignificant things start to erode that foundation. And one of the most destructive habits is something so subtle it's easy to overlook, but it has the power to create a deep rift between you and your spouse. And ultimately, when given enough time, it has the power to end your marriage. And I want you to think about your own marriage. Have you noticed small things chipping away at your connection? Imagine your spouse is sharing his or her frustrations from the day, and instead of really hearing them out, you're busy thinking about how to defend yourself or what solution you're going to offer. Or worse, you cut them off to say something that completely misses the point of what they've been saying. I have a lot of clients who've done this, and they respond to the good or the bad things their spouse says to them by jumping in with some sort of story about something that happened to them and they felt it was relevant. And some people believe that this is normal or even good, and if that's you, you're wrong. When you do that, it doesn't convey that you understand what the other person is saying or what they went through because you went through something similar like you probably think it does. It actually sends the message of, okay, time for you to shut up now because I'm ready to talk and I'm sick of hearing you talk. Probably not a good message for your marriage. So if you're the kind of person who values growth and is okay with your preconceived notions being challenged, then keep watching this video. If you're not and you want your marriage to stay stagnant, then just click off the video. Okay, so I assume since you're here, you're ready for growth. This mistake often leads to fights, misunderstandings, and a sense of being unheard. It's like trying to debate in your own marriage, but your victory is leaving your spouse feeling unheard and unloved, and the trophy that you've won is a trophy for most efficient marriage killer. In fact, anytime you feel like you are winning a debate with your spouse, I want you to ask yourself what the cost of that victory is. Have you hurt your husband or your wife? Have you widened the relational gap between you? Because the only winning we should be trying to do in our marriages is winning with your spouse, not against her or him. The Bible teaches us that when you got married, two became one. And therefore, it seems pretty crazy to try to win against them when you realize you're only fighting against yourself. So have you ever caught yourself in this trap? Let me know in the comments, how do you handle those types of moments? Practicing this detrimental habit is like being in a battle of tug of war with your spouse. Both of you are pulling as hard as you can, but neither of you is gaining any ground. The rope stretches, tension builds, and both of you are left exhausted, frustrated, and flat out angry. And this is literally what it's like when you're constantly hurting each other and your marriage in this way. No one wins, and the tension just keeps building. When communication turns into a tug of war, it's easy to see how emotional disconnect starts to set in. You're both pulling so hard to get your point across that you lose sight of each other's needs. And over time, this leads to a breakdown in trust, intimacy, and that deep connection that it takes to make a marriage strong. But stick around, because in just a moment, I'm going to share a strategy that can turn this dynamic around completely. Chances are you've known someone like this. Who knows? Maybe this person is you. I used to know a woman, we'll just call her Lynn. That's not her real name, but that's what we're gonna call her. And Lynn did not listen to anything that anyone said. And I know that sounds like an extreme statement, but let me explain why I say it. The moment you would tell Lynn about a great experience you had, she would quickly let you know that she had a similar experience, except hers was even better. The moment you told her about an extreme loss you had, maybe a close family member had died, she would quickly jump in and interrupt and let you know that even though it was just her pet cat, her loss was just as gut-wrenching or maybe even worse than yours was. And if you had anxiety, Lynn had once had worse anxiety. If you had depression, Lynn had once had worse depression. To be honest, I really wish that this was a made-up story, but it's not. Lynn is a real person, and what she was practicing is a form of this habit that will over time destroy any marriage. And if you're thinking that it's a habit of one-upping, good guess, but you're wrong. You should just keep watching. I won't keep you waiting any longer. This thing that I'm talking about is the same thing that I've seen multiple clients do, and it's listening to respond. What I mean by that is if someone is talking and you are simply listening enough to collect the right amount of data points to create a response, you're doing it. And if that sounds harmless or innocent to you, keep listening, because it can take a few different forms. It can be clearly negative, like when you are arguing with your spouse or with someone else, and you're just listening as they formulate their argument, and you're waiting to find some flaw in it. No matter how small that flaw might be, the moment you find it, you're just gonna pounce on it like a desperately hungry tiger, ready to tear apart the entire argument with that one mistake. That's pretty clearly negative, but so is what Lynn was doing. She listened to respond so that she could one-up the other person who was talking to her. No conversation was ever about the other person. It was always about how she could prove that she was better than them. In fact, this is something that insecure people tend to do, because if I can't force you to accept that I'm great, then maybe I'm not. And that's a thought that I just can't bear. That's how that line of thinking goes anyway. In fact, as a general rule, listening to respond feels really good for your ego, but it's pretty much always bad for the relationship. But hey, maybe you don't want a better relationship. Maybe you don't want a better marriage. If that's the case, then keep doing your thing, man. On the other hand, if you're ready for a shift in your mindset and you want to have a healthier marriage, then just keep watching. And by the way, if you're getting any value from this, please hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss more content like it. Let's be real for a second. You've seen this in yourself, and you've definitely spotted it in others. This habit of listening just to respond. In fact, it's so common it almost feels natural, but what does it actually lead to? Let's break that down a bit. When your spouse feels like they're not being heard, they don't just get upset in the moment. They start to withdraw. Emotionally, they'll begin to shut down. And that means that they stop sharing their thoughts, their feelings, their dreams, everything. And this isn't just about avoiding a few conflicts here and there. This is about stopping your marriage from slipping into that cold, distant state where you're not even arguing anymore because there's really nothing left to say. You're just two people living in the same house, perhaps raising kids together, but essentially, you become really good roommates, or perhaps not. You become roommates who barely talk, barely connect, and don't really like each other that much. And the terrible thing is you barely notice until it's too late. And this is where the real danger lies. It's not the big blow-up fights that destroy marriages. It's that slow, almost invisible drift that separates you and your spouse. And if you ignore this and decide not to change the way that you listen to your spouse, it's like playing with fire, except instead of burning down your house, you'll end up seeing your marriage go up in flames. And so how do you stop this downward spiral? What's the key to transforming your communication and honestly saving your marriage? Here it is. It's about listening to understand, not listening to respond. It sounds simple, but trust me, this is a game changer. It can make all the difference in the world and all the difference in your marriage. Listening to understand, as opposed to listening to respond, is one of the most powerful tools that you can have at your disposal. It goes far beyond just hearing words. It's about sending this clear and profound message to your spouse that resonates on multiple levels. When you truly listen to understand, you're telling your spouse several key things to reinforce the foundation of your marriage. First, you're telling them that they matter, that their thoughts, their feelings, and their perspectives are important to you. And this isn't just about hearing them, it's about deeply valuing what they have to say. Second, you're reassuring them that they're safe. Emotionally and psychologically, when someone feels heard and understood, it creates this safe space where they can be vulnerable, they can be themselves without feeling they'll be judged or dismissed. And third, you're affirming that they are loved, not just in this broad sense, but in the detailed, intricate ways that are unique to your marriage. The Bible teaches us that love is patient and kind, and listening to understand is a direct manifestation of that patient and kind love. Fourth, you're validating their feelings, recognizing the emotions behind their words, not just acknowledging what they're saying. And fifth and finally, you're showing that you are committed. You're committed to them, you're committed to the marriage, and to continuous growth together. Listening and understand is not just about one conversation, it's about building a habit that strengthens your marriage over time. In essence, listening to understand versus listening to respond is about choosing connection over competition, love over ego, and commitment over complacency. It's a simple shift in approach, but it's one that speaks volumes about the depth of your love, your respect, and the dedication you have to your spouse. When you practice it consistently, it has the power to transform not just your conversations, but the very fabric of your marriage. So what does this look like in real life? Listening to understand means that when your spouse is talking, you're not off in your own head somewhere else planning your next brilliant comeback. You're present. You're focused entirely on what they're saying, and more importantly, on what they're feeling. This is about empathy, truly stepping into their shoes, trying to see the world from their perspective. It's about being genuinely curious about their emotions, their experiences. And when you do this, it's not just hearing their words, you're hearing their heart. And that's where the magic happens. That's where real connection is built. So let's take it a step further. The Bible has something amazing to say about this in Proverbs 18:21. It says, "The tongue has the power of life and death." Think about that for a second. Your words can either breathe life into your marriage or slowly tear it apart. So when you choose to listen to understand, you're choosing to speak life into your relationship. You're choosing to build up, to encourage, and to foster that connection that reflects love and respect that we're called to show each other. It's more than just avoiding arguments. It's about nurturing the bond that keeps your marriage strong and healthy. And when you make this shift, when you start listening to understand, you're going to notice something incredible. Your spouse is going to start to feel valued, respected, and most importantly, loved. And what does that do? It creates this rock solid foundation of trust and emotional intimacy. This is the kind of stuff that takes your marriage from just okay to incredible, because when your spouse feels truly heard, they're going to open up more. They're going to share more, and you're going to feel closer than you've been probably in years. And here's the thing. This shift doesn't just make your marriage better, it makes it stronger. And when the foundation is solid, you can weather any storm together. And that's what listening to understand does. It builds that foundation brick by brick, conversation by conversation. To take it even further, this has an extremely positive impact on arguments. Listening to understand changes the entire dynamic of when you disagree. Instead of your conversations turning into a battle of words, they become opportunities to grow closer. When you're focused on understanding rather than winning, conflicts actually become moments where you can strengthen your bond. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's about how you can support each other through whatever you're facing. You're on the same team after all. And that's what it means to truly win in marriage, not by defeating your spouse in an argument, but by growing together through that argument. And I'd love to hear from you. How do you handle disagreements in your marriage? Do you listen to understand, or have you been waiting to make your point? Drop a comment. I'd love to hear. So take a moment right now. Think about how you've been listening to your spouse. Are you waiting for your turn to talk, or are you actually trying to understand them? If you're ready for a change, make a conscious effort to shift from listening to respond to listening to understand. This simple shift can truly transform your marriage, bringing you closer together and building a bond that lasts a lifetime. Now, you've just learned about a common mistake that can destroy your marriage, but here's the flip side. What if there was one simple habit that could completely transform your entire relationship for the better? Imagine there was one thing you could start doing today that would strengthen your connection, improve communication, and bring you closer than ever. Well, there is, and I've got a video about it right here. Click that to watch and discover how to make this powerful change in your marriage.